Hey there YouTube, how's it going? I'm back and I wanted to do another 6-scale action figure review. Today taking a look at not a new figure, but a figure that's been around for a little while, that I've had in my collection for a little while. And just kind of thought, what the heck, let's go back and take a look at it. This is the 3016 scale Jaime Lannister. From their Game of Thrones license. So I'm going to take the camera off here real quick. We'll go in for a little zoom in. Get a good look at Jaime Lannister's head sculpt. Some of those paint details. Come down. Check out that outfit. And then put it back and get rolling on this. So, real quick now, Jaime Lannister is actually one of my favorite characters from A Song of Ice and Fire and Game of Thrones. When I was first getting into the series, I was looking for sort of that stereotypical knight to really invest my interest into. And at first I thought it was going to be Jaime Lannister. But then he turned out to be quite the villain. But it was too late. I was already hooked on his character. Then he got the redemption arc. And it wound up being one of the most best told stories in the books and the show for a little while. So now let's get a look at this figure. He is on the proprietary Threezero body that they use for a lot of their figures. I don't really think they've changed it around too much. And this is one of the few figures that they've done in the line that has full-on knight armor, more or less. Now, this armor wouldn't really be super great in the real world, not entirely because he doesn't have a helmet that he wears, but it is still pretty cool to have Threezero doing a full-on armored figure. Now, all this armor is plastic, so it's not a very heavy figure, which is okay because I don't think Threezero's bodies honestly hold up that well with die-cast pieces. I think it would be simply too heavy for them. So all of his joints are stiff and they work well, given that. There is some rubber added on here, so this scale mail is rubber. His greaves are made out of rubber and I think faux leather at the straps, so that's all right. And then his under tunic here is also a nice pleather sort of material. Now, it doesn't feel like the kind of stuff that's going to flake over time, and I am quite happy about that. This figure will probably last for a while. His cape is held on, and I did go back and watch the show, and this is actually pretty accurate, but it just sort of clips in to these little clasps here. There's a little metal hook at the end of the cape, and it just hooks right through there. So the cape comes on and off pretty easily. I actually put mine in there and applied a bit of force to keep it hooked in more securely. You can still get it on and off, but it's now more secure because the cape would come off a bit too easily. In my opinion. And I just wanted it to be held on there a bit more securely. So let's get into the articulation real quick. If you've had a Threezero figure, you know what you're getting into, and luckily the way this armor is cut, not much of his articulation is hindered. In fact, the only real hindrance to this figure's articulation is going to be this puffy undersuit right here. That hinders it much more than the armor, which I think is pretty interesting. It shows pretty good construction and design for this figure, and possibly for the outfit itself from the show. So these shoulder pads here are just hooked on with some Velcro right there so they don't get in the way. You can bring the arm up well above his head if you work it around that material. Comes down, reattach that, comes out as much as you'd want. Good double jointed bend in the elbows, and while Threezero's push that up a little bit, while Threezero's wrist pegs are different sizes than most other 6-scale companies, you can still get the same amount of motion because when it comes down to it, it is just the same as any other 6-scale wrist pegs, just not your standard size on either end. So you can't really swap him easily onto a true type body if you were looking for a better or bigger body. Now, Jaime Lannister's armor is entirely removable, and I don't have them with me today. Let's pop that cape off real quick. But you can also attach a different pair of boots to him. So all you have to do is untie this back here, and then unloop the rubber belt here, and take that armor off, and you can display him how he looked in his fight with Ned Stark, or when he was just walking around King's Landing without the Kingsguard armor on. So that's nice. You will also notice that underneath this tunic, and I'll lift it up down here because it's a bit easier, there is that beautiful Lannister crimson red. So when you display him without the armor, you actually take this flap right here by his neck and you pull it down a little bit, and that is how you get that look accurate to the TV show. Let's continue on with articulation with the lower body. His legs are relatively unhindered. You can get them up to about 90 degrees there, double jointed bend at the knees, and then with his armor boots on at the very least, you have wonderful amount of ankle motion. And that about sums that up there. He can also do the splits, but why would you want Jaime Lannister doing the splits? I don't know. Maybe you do. So that about does it for the articulation. It is a well-articulated, well-unencumbered figure in that department. I'm going to see just how close up and focused I can get on that head sculpt there. Maybe I have to adjust the lighting a little tiny bit. Maybe it's too bright in there. There, that's a bit better. So you can see here on camera that for the most part and from certain angles, you really do get a wonderful Jaime Lannister likeness. Certainly one of Threezero's better head sculpts and production paint apps. I would say that maybe they didn't quite nail the nose as well as they could have, and that does tend to throw things off a little bit, but they even got that little mole underneath his eye and slight furrowing to the brows. This is definitely Jaime Lannister. It's definitely Nikolai Coster-Waldau, but most Threezero sculpts leave a little something to be desired. That said, there's not a lot of custom Jaime Lannister sculpts out there, and especially not from the first couple of seasons when he had his hair a little bit longer and he was generally portraying a villainous character. So this sculpt definitely gets the job done. I'm not, there's no real questioning who it is or who it's supposed to be. So I give that a pass in my book, and especially from certain angles, he does really shine, especially amongst other Game of Thrones 6-scale figures, because let's be honest, Threezero has a pretty spotty track record with their production head sculpts. The accessories all look well and good enough. He has this little dagger here, which he can slip through, or which he did slip through the eyeball of a Stark retainer during his fight with Sir Eddard Stark, the Warden of the North. His first sword that he uses before he started using Joffrey's Widow's Wail, spoiler alert, I guess, for the 4th season of Game of Thrones when Joffrey dies, but Jaime Lannister starts using Widow's Wail in his offhand because he loses that bad boy. The details on his original Lannister sword are pretty good. Again, this is just a plastic sword, great bend to it. It's not going to just snap easily. But it does look absolutely regal. It's supposed to be covered in gold because the Lannisters, everything they do is gold. And when you get down here into the pommel, I'm not sure if you can really make that out or not too well, but there is a lion's head sculpted on either side of it. So it's all very accurate to his costume and accessories and design from the show, which works pretty well for me. Now, the one thing, a point of contention that I do have is Threezero and their weathering. It's always beautiful. Threezero really weathers stuff so nicely, and it looks great, but here I'm not so sure that it's accurate. Let's get a close-up of that armor. First of all, this armor was pretty gosh darn gold in the show, with that white coming through there. That all looks quite nice. But here on Threezero's, it's much more of a burnt bronze copper kind of color, and they really went all out, giving it quite the patina, it seems, as well. So I'm really not sure if his outfit was quite this weathered ever in the show. It doesn't bug me. This looks like a, member of the Kingsguard who's definitely been in battle. So maybe this is what his armor would have looked like when he led the siege and battle against the Greyjoys. But as for a figure to represent how he looked in the show, I really don't think his armor was quite in this same state of disrepair. I am glad to say that while Threezero did weather pretty heavily, they carried it all the way down to his shin guards. And really, if you want a cleaner Jaime Lannister look, you can always just take that armor off and display him as you see him more often in that show, without wearing the Kingsguard armor. Now, I personally really like the look with the armor, and I think that having a fully armored figure like Jaime Lannister, also now we have the Hound and Brienne of Tarth. I don't really count the newer Jon Snow quite as much because the Stark armor is really sort of a light armor looking kind of thing, but having these full armored figures in your Game of Thrones display really helps the display pop and helps these individual figures stick out, just because there really aren't a lot of them that have been produced by Threezero quite yet. So there we go. I didn't really go over the sculpt articulation. It's your standard cut underneath the neck and a simple neck joint going into the body, so you get tons of range of motion. There's really nothing to worry about there. And that's really about it. No real leather materials, which, has its pros and cons. The belt doesn't look as good as it could because of it, but the belt will probably also last longer because they used rubber and not the faux leather. So it's really not as fragile of a figure because they generally went with less expensive plastics. And as far as Jaime Lannister goes, there is a more expensive Scaletta custom out there from his latter season appearance. I believe that figure is wearing his Lannister armor. Beautiful looking figure, which I personally would love to get my hands on. However, it's pretty tough to find, and I was unable to get into the pre-order for it, so I didn't get down on that run when I probably should have. So until I find one of those floating around in the aftermarket, this is the Jaime Lannister that's representing the character in my collection. And ultimately, they could have done worse. So I'm glad that at least for Jaime here, Threezero delivered a product which is pretty darn passable. I'm quite happy with it. And for what you get, I think this guy at retail ran like $180, $190. It really wasn't. Threezero's good. They always keep their figures under the current market value for the most part. Now they are kind of beneath the quality threshold if you're going to compare them to Hot Toys or Ace Muse even, I think, is producing higher quality figures, at least in terms of paint and production and likenesses. But Threezero did quite well with this one, and I'm happy to have it in my collection. So anyways, that's about going to wrap up this review If I've missed anything or you have any other questions about this figure that I didn't answer, I know I didn't take the armor off. I apologize for that, but it can be kind of a pain in the butt to put back on and get it all to look right. And I am working on a limited time schedule right now, so I just wanted to get in there and bust out this review of an older figure real quick. But if I can answer any other questions for you, or you have any comments to make about this figure, please feel free to get at me down in the comment section. Otherwise, stay happy, stay healthy, and keep on collecting. Bye-bye.